All right, so get ready because we're diving headfirst into the world of blockchain. But this isn't just another crypto chat, you know. This time we're going deep on something that's got developers all over scratching their heads. It's called the blockchain trilemma. And it's kind of like you're trying to juggle chainsaws.
Yeah.
Each one of those chainsaws represents like a super important part of blockchain tech.
hmm
Decentralization, security, scalability. Stick with us and you'll be surprised how much this thing impacts you, even if you've never touched Bitcoin in your life.
Yeah, we're really talking about like the foundational principles of blockchain here. Like, how does it all work and why should we even care? And you've brought a really interesting mix of sources to the table for us to unpack today. We've got Blockchain Wayne, the Techopedia article, and even Crypto Sketch 101, which I gotta admit, I've never even heard of before.
Well, get ready because they're awesome.
Yeah.
Crypto Sketch 101 is really good at explaining complex ideas in a way that anybody can get. But before we get into all the crazy details, let's just break down this whole trilemma thing. So, like, what's the deal with this decentralization thing?
Well, imagine a system where nobody is in control, right? That's decentralization in a nutshell. So it's like a whole network of computers all working together. They're all maintaining this shared ledger. No central authority, no single point of failure, right?
So it's kind of like a hive mind, but for computers.
Exactly. And this ties directly into the security aspect of things, too. So because that ledger is spread out over so many different computers, it makes it really, really hard to hack or manipulate it. Think about trying to like change a historical record in a library that has thousands of copies. Nearly impossible.
But blockchain Wayne mentioned something about a 51% attack. That sounds kind of scary. How does that even work if it's supposed to be so secure?
Well, that's a major vulnerability, and it really highlights that tension that lives within the trilemma. A 51% attack happens when somebody or some group gets control of more than half of the network's computing power. And if they manage to do that, then they can potentially do things like double spend coins or even alter the blockchain itself. But the more decentralized a network is, the harder it becomes to do that kind of attack, and way more expensive too.
Oh, so it's like a numbers game. The more players you have in the game, the safer it is.
Precisely. But then that brings us to that third element of the trilemma, scalability. You see, the more decentralized and the more secure you make a blockchain, the slower it can become to process those transactions. It's kind of like if you keep adding more lanes to a highway, it might let you handle more traffic, but it can also make things a lot more complex and even cause bottlenecks.
And I'm guessing this is where those surprising facts from Crypto Sketch 101 come into play.
Yes, exactly. They make a really good point. Some of these blockchains out there, they really struggle to keep up with the sheer volume of transactions that happen every second on traditional systems. Like Visa or MasterCard, they handle thousands of transactions per second.
So if blockchain is supposed to be this revolutionary new tech, why is it so slow? Seems like a pretty big roadblock.
Well, that's exactly it. That's the heart of the trilemma. You just can't have it all. Maximizing one of those elements, it often means that you got to sacrifice some of the others. Like if you focus too much on security, then you might make it slow and expensive to use. Kind of like having one of those super strong locks that takes forever to open.
Okay, now that's starting to make a bit more sense to me. But if there's always going to be this tension, why are people still so hyped up about blockchain? What are those benefits that make all these challenges worth it?
Well, that's where things get super interesting. Because despite this whole trilemma thing, blockchain has huge potential, and not just for cryptocurrency either. Just imagine revolutionizing industries like finance. We could make transactions faster, cheaper, and way more transparent. Or think about supply chains, like being able to track products from the moment they leave the farm all the way to your table. That could help combat fraud and make sure that we're sourcing things ethically. And even voting systems could get a makeover. They could become way more secure and tamper-proof.
So by understanding this trilemma, we can actually evaluate different blockchain projects more effectively. Like, can they really deliver on what they're promising, or are there hidden trade-offs that they're not telling us about?
Exactly. It's kind of like being an informed shopper, right? You wouldn't buy a car without understanding its gas mileage or its safety features, would you? Same goes for blockchain. Knowing about this trilemma, it lets you figure out the limitations and the potential of different projects out there.
Okay, so we've got this big challenge, the trilemma. But are developers just giving up? Or are there people out there actually working on solutions? There's got to be some hope, right?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, there's a ton of innovation happening in this space. The Techopedia article actually outlines a whole bunch of different approaches. There are layer one solutions. Those are aimed at improving the foundation of blockchains that already exist. And then there are layer two solutions. Those are built on top of existing blockchains, kind of like adding express lanes to that crowded highway we were talking about earlier.
Okay, I'm ready for the deep dive into solutions now. What are some of the most promising ideas that are out there?
Well, one really exciting layer one solution is something called proof of stake. It's basically a faster and more energy efficient alternative to that proof of work system that Bitcoin uses. So instead of having miners compete to solve these crazy complex puzzles, proof of stake uses validators, and they're chosen based on how much cryptocurrency they've staked or locked up, like collateral.
Interesting. So it's kind of like a trust system where those who have the most invested have more say in things.
Exactly. And this shift, it has huge implications for both security and scalability. Crypto Sketch 101 actually made this really cool comparison. They compared proof of work to those old incandescent light bulbs, the ones that use a ton of energy. They work, but there are way better options out there now, like those energy efficient LED lights.
Oh, so proof of stake is like the LED of the blockchain world.
Yeah.
I love that analogy. But they also mentioned something called sharding. How does that fit into all of this?
Well, sharding is basically like, imagine you're trying to bake a giant pizza. You could bake the whole thing at once, but it would take forever. Or you could slice it up into smaller pieces and bake them all at the same time. That's what sharding does. It breaks the blockchain's data down into smaller pieces so that transactions can be processed simultaneously. And that could potentially lead to a massive increase in speed without compromising security.
That sounds pretty promising. And Crypto Sketch 101 mentioned a couple of specific blockchains that are already doing this, right? Zilliqa and Tezos. What are they doing well, and what are the challenges they're facing?
So Zilliqa, for them, sharding has allowed them to achieve super high transaction throughput, which makes it a good fit for things like micropayments and even gaming. But their challenge is maintaining that security and decentralization as they add more and more shards.
And how is Tezos approaching this differently?
Well, Tezos uses something called liquid sharding, which is a fancy way of saying that it allows them to allocate their resources more dynamically, which means that they can potentially scale even better. But of course, that added complexity can make development and adoption a bit more challenging. It's that constant trade-off we keep seeing with any solution to the trilemma.
So it's not just about finding the coolest new tech, but also understanding how it's actually being implemented and what those trade-offs are.
Exactly. And it's not just about layer 1 solutions either. Crypto Sketch 101 also highlighted some really cool layer 2 solutions like sidechains and state channels.
Oh yeah, those sidechains are like adding extra lanes to the blockchain highway, right? They let transactions happen more quickly. And state channels are like opening a tab at a bar. You can make a bunch of transactions off-chain and then just settle the final balance later on.
Exactly. These layer 2 solutions are a way to scale things up without having to compromise security or decentralization. It's like adding more horsepower to your engine without having to redesign the entire car.
So it sounds like there are a lot of smart people out there really tackling this problem.
Mhm.
But is there any clear winner emerging? Or are we still in the wild west of blockchain development?
Oh, it's definitely still the early days. There's no magic bullet here, and the best approach really depends on what you're trying to do and what your goals are. But one project that's getting a lot of attention for its really ambitious attempts to solve this trilemma is Ethereum. It's the second largest cryptocurrency out there.
Oh yeah, Ethereum. I've heard a lot about their plans for big upgrades. Are they actually trying to tackle all three parts of the trilemma at the same time?
They are. They really are. And their planned transition to proof of stake, it's a big one. It's called the merge. That's a major step towards improving scalability and sustainability. They're also looking into sharding. That's through an upgrade called the surge. And that's aimed at further increasing capacity.
Wow, that's a lot to take on. So what are the potential risks and rewards of these upgrades? Are they really going to be able to solve the trilemma once and for all?
Yeah.
Let's dig into that in part two.
So we're back. And last time, things were getting really interesting. We were talking about Ethereum's plans to tackle the blockchain trilemma head-on with these big upgrades like the merge and the surge. Let's dive a little deeper into what that actually means for both Ethereum and for the whole blockchain world.
You know, it's pretty amazing to see Ethereum, a platform with so much already built on it, trying to make such a fundamental shift. Moving to proof of stake, it's a massive undertaking, both in terms of the technology and getting everyone on board. Yeah, Crypto Sketch 101, they had this great analogy comparing proof of work to those old energy-guzzling incandescent light bulbs. And they made a good point about how proof of stake could make the network so much more sustainable and efficient. But are there any downsides to this approach?
Well, one thing that people are worried about is the potential for centralization. With proof of stake, the more coins you hold, the more influence you have. And some people worry that this could lead to a situation where just a small group of really wealthy individuals or institutions end up controlling the whole network.
So it's like solving one problem but potentially creating a whole new one. You fix the energy issue, but then you might end up sacrificing decentralization.
Yeah, it's a valid concern. But the developers working on Ethereum, they're very aware of this, and they're putting mechanisms in place to try and mitigate those risks. For example, they're designing the system to encourage a wide distribution of stake so that no one entity can gain too much power.
So it's all about finding that balance, trying to get the benefits of proof of stake without losing that core principle of decentralization. But what about the surge, their plan to implement sharding? Where does that fit into all of this?
The surge is all about boosting the number of transactions the network can handle, and sharding is a key piece of that puzzle. Remember that pizza analogy we talked about? By splitting the network up into these smaller pieces, they can process transactions in parallel, and that could potentially lead to a huge jump in speed.
Right, like adding more ovens to bake those pizza slices faster. But Crypto Sketch 101 mentioned that sharding comes with its own challenges. They talked about Zilliqa and Tezos already using sharding, but they're running into some trade-offs. What kind of hurdles could Ethereum face with the surge?
One of the big challenges is making sure that data stays secure and consistent across all of those shards. It's like making sure that each slice of that pizza has all the right toppings and is cooked just right.
So there's a risk that splitting the network up could actually make it more vulnerable if it's not done carefully.
Exactly. And the Ethereum developers are working on some pretty complex cryptography and consensus mechanisms to try and address this.
hmm
But it's a really complex undertaking, and there's always the chance that some unforeseen problems could pop up.
Okay, so Ethereum is taking on a lot with these upgrades. They're trying to solve the energy problem, make things faster, and keep it secure and decentralized all at the same time. That's a pretty ambitious plan. But why should the average person even care about all of this? Like, what's the big deal if Ethereum gets faster and more efficient?
Well, remember that Ethereum isn't just a cryptocurrency. It's a platform where developers are building all sorts of cool new applications, things like decentralized finance, supply chain management, even digital art and collectibles.
Oh, right, like those NFTs everyone was talking about a while back.
Exactly. NFTs are just one example of what's possible on Ethereum. But for these applications to really take off and become mainstream, Ethereum needs to be scalable, secure, and easy to use.
So if Ethereum can pull this off, it could open the door to a whole new wave of decentralized applications that could impact our lives in so many ways.
Exactly. Just imagine a world where you can securely manage your identity, your medical records, your financial transactions, all on a decentralized platform, free from the control of any single company or government. That's the kind of future that Ethereum is working towards.
Okay, now I'm really starting to see the bigger picture here. But Ethereum isn't the only one out there, right? What are some of the other projects that are trying to solve the trilemma in new and innovative ways? We talked about layer 2 solutions like side chains and state channels before, but are there any other approaches worth looking at?
Absolutely. The blockchain world is constantly evolving, and there are new ideas and projects popping up all the time. One example that's gaining a lot of traction is Polkadot. They're using a really unique approach with their relay chain and parachains. It's kind of like a network of interconnected highways, each with its own rules and features, but they all benefit from the shared security and interoperability of that central relay chain.
So it's like having different lanes for different types of traffic, but everyone still has to follow the same basic rules of the road.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And this approach allows for a lot of flexibility and customization. Each parachain can be designed for a specific use case while still taking advantage of the security and scalability of the overall network.
That sounds really efficient.
And,
Are there any other projects out there that are taking a completely different approach to solving the trilemma?
well, one that's worth mentioning is Algorand. They're focusing on achieving consensus through this unique algorithm that's designed to be really fast and energy efficient. They're trying to build a blockchain that's both scalable and accessible to a wide range of users.
So it's like a race to find the best solution, with each project taking a different path to get to the finish line.
Exactly. And there's no guarantee that any single approach is going to be the ultimate winner. But all this competition and innovation, it's pushing the entire field forward, really expanding what's possible with blockchain technology.
It's exciting to think about all the possibilities. But with all these different projects and technical terms, it can be tough to keep up. How can the average person even make sense of it all?
That's a great question. I think the most important thing is to focus on the underlying principles and the trade-offs that are involved. Remember, every blockchain project is making choices about which parts of the trilemma to prioritize. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
So it's kind of like being an informed voter, right? You got to do your research, understand the different platforms and their proposals, and then decide which approach aligns best with your values and beliefs.
Exactly. It's about empowering yourself with the knowledge to make smart decisions about the technologies that are going to shape our future. And keep in mind, the blockchain world is constantly changing. What seems like a groundbreaking solution today might be old news tomorrow.
It's definitely a wild ride. We've covered a lot of ground today, from Ethereum's big plans to the innovative approaches of projects like Polkadot and Algorand. But the conversation doesn't end here. In our final part, we're going to step back and think about the bigger picture. What does the trilemma mean for the future of blockchain? And how could it impact our lives in ways we haven't even thought of yet? Stay tuned. Okay, so here we are, the final stretch of our deep dive into the blockchain trilemma. We've broken down the challenge, looked at some possible solutions, and even peeked into Ethereum's grand plans.
Now it's time to zoom out a little bit. What does this all mean for the future of blockchain? And more importantly, what does it mean for you?
Exactly. Our sources didn't exactly come with a crystal ball, but they did get us thinking about what the road ahead might look like. Crypto Sketch 101, they really hammered home the importance of scalability if blockchain is going to go mainstream. If it wants to compete with the big players, it needs to handle a ton of transactions without breaking a sweat.
No doubt about it. It's like trying to cram all the cars in a whole city onto a single lane road. It just won't work. But as we've been talking about, scaling things up often means running headfirst into those trilemma trade-offs.
So how do we solve this puzzle then? Can we really get mass adoption without sacrificing the things that make blockchain so special?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's not just a tech problem, it's a philosophical one. The trilemma really makes us think about trust, power, and control in this digital world.
It's like choosing your own adventure, you know? Do we go for speed and efficiency, even if it means giving up some decentralization? Or do we hold on to those core principles, even if it means things move a little slower?
Exactly. And those choices are going to shape the future of blockchain and how it affects everything. Just imagine a world where supply chains are completely transparent. You can see everything and nobody can mess with them, all thanks to blockchain. You could trace your food from the farm to your plate, make sure that fancy handbag is the real deal, or even guarantee that the stuff used to make your phone was sourced ethically.
That sounds pretty amazing. But wouldn't something like that need a blockchain that can handle a ridiculous amount of data and transactions?
It definitely would, which is why those layer 2 solutions we talked about, side chains and state channels, are so important. They give us a way to boost capacity without messing with security or decentralization.
Right, like building extra lanes on that highway to handle all the extra traffic.
Yeah.
But even with those fancy solutions, it seems like there are always going to be new challenges and trade-offs.
That's just how innovation works. It's a constant back and forth. We try things, we learn, and we adapt. The blockchain world is still pretty young, and we're just scratching the surface of what this tech can do, but also how complex it is.
It's exciting and a little bit scary all at the same time, I guess. But at the end of the day, this isn't just about ones and zeros. It's about how we want to build the future, our digital future.
You got it. This whole blockchain trilemma thing, it's not just a tech challenge, it's a reflection of what we value as a society. Do we want a future where just a few people have all the power? Or do we want to spread it out? Do we care more about efficiency or resilience?
Those are some really big questions, and it sounds like we're still figuring out the answers. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. If you were building a blockchain, what would be most important to you? Which part of the trilemma would you focus on, and why? What would you be willing to give up to make your vision of the future a reality?
That's a great question to ponder. There isn't really a right or wrong answer, but the fact that we're even wrestling with these choices is what makes this such a fascinating and important field.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
So to everyone listening out there, don't be afraid to jump in, explore this world, and ask those tough questions. The future of blockchain is being built right now, and your voice matters. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride through the blockchain